I need to flatten this slab out for a standing desk project that I'm working on, so in today's episode, we're gonna build a router sled to help us get it perfectly flat. Let's get started. Since this sled's probably only getting used for 1 or 2 projects, I decided to go with the simplest design possible and build it out of this cheaper CDX plywood. The desk I'm building is 48 inches, but I have another project in mind that may be closer to 60 inches, so I made sure to leave room for that one. Once I had it cut down to length with the track saw, I ripped it down to 30 inches on the table saw, and then I ripped some strips to build the frames for the sled to ride on. I made these 2 inches tall so they'd be slightly taller than the rough slab, but still allow enough room for the router to reach all the way to the final thickness. I doubled up the side rails for a little more strength and a larger surface for the sled to ride on. Once I had the 2 parts glued and screwed together, I screwed them to the base. So there's our base. Now we just need to build the carrier for the router and figure out how to keep this thing flat. For the sled itself, I just used a piece of this leftover melamine so the router will slide a little easier on it. And speaking of the router, I'm just going to use my trim router with this 1.5 inch surfacing bit from Speed Tool, and I'll leave a link to the bit in the description if you're interested. If you're going to be doing a lot of slab flattening, I would recommend using a larger router with a larger bit, but since I'm going to be doing this once or twice, I'm just using what I have and taking smaller passes to let the router work. Once I cut the sled to fit the router base, I drilled a couple of 2-inch holes with a hole saw on the drill press, and then I cut the straight lines out between the two with the table saw, leaving the slot for the router bit to ride in. For the sides, I just doubled up some more plywood, keeping it low enough for the dust port to ride over the top, and then I screwed that to the sled. This will help guide the router and add some rigidity to the sled so it doesn't sag while I'm running the router over top of it. To finish the sled off, I just added these 2 runners on the outside to keep it tracking somewhat straight and make sure I don't do something stupid like push it too far in and gouge the router bit deep into the slab that I'm working on. All right, well, that's it for the sled. So next step, we're gonna take it over to the table saw so I have a nice flat surface, get everything leveled out as best I can, and then we give it a shot. The plywood I used for the base was actually warped pretty bad with a big hump in the middle, so my plan was to use the table saw top to keep it flat. Unfortunately, after trying to clamp the middle down, I quickly realized that I was gonna need a plan B for this one. Any more? After a little more thought, I finally decided to just turn it the other way, and I screwed it all the way across the middle section down to the outfeed table just to keep it flat because the hump was actually running in both directions. Then I used some clamps on the ends and some shims on the other end to make sure it was sitting perfectly flat. Once I was happy with how flat that was, I locked the slab down to the base and made a couple passes with the router. As you can see, it makes a pretty good mess, and it's going to take quite a few more passes to get where I need to be, but once I'm there, I should have a flat top that I can cut to size, sand, and finish. All right. It really can't get much more simple than that. Just keep making passes until I get all 4 corners knocked down to the top, then we'll flip it over, do the bottom side, and see what we need to do as far as filling in any voids, any epoxy, or anything like that. But if you want to see how this desk turns out, you'll have to come back for the next video. So see you then. Thanks for watching.